"Your Grace, the cake is surrendering before the bride does." Emily Parker spoke the words beneath her breath, but the ballroom had fallen so quiet that nearly every guest heard them. The wedding cake leaned dangerously to one side, its white icing beginning to slide after Emily's sleeve caught the silver stand. She reached for it, stepped on the edge of her ivory gown, and nearly lost her balance. Somehow, she saved the cake. Her bouquet was less fortunate. It dropped into a bowl of sugared fruit with a soft, undignified splash. A few guests gasped. Lady Margaret Hartwell closed her fan with a sharp snap. Emily remained frozen beside the table, one hand still supporting the crooked cake, her cheeks warm with embarrassment. Across the candlelit ballroom, Duke William Hartwell stared at his new bride with the grave expression Ravenhurst had known for 7 years. He wore black, as he always did. Silver touched the hair at his temples. His gray eyes held the stillness of winter stone. No music had been played during the ceremony. No flowers had been permitted in the chapel. Even the wedding feast seemed arranged for mourning rather than celebration. Emily looked from the ruined bouquet to the guests who waited for her humiliation to deepen. Then the top layer of the cake shifted again. She caught it against her palm and sighed. "At least one of us appears determined to survive this marriage." The sound that followed was so unfamiliar that several servants turned toward the windows, as though a bird had flown into the room. William laughed. It was not loud. It lasted scarcely more than a breath. Yet it crossed the ballroom like sunlight entering a sealed crypt. His hand rose toward his mouth, too late to conceal it. Lady Margaret's fan slipped from her fingers. An elderly footman carrying a tray stopped mid-step. Near the doorway, Mrs. Bell, the housekeeper, pressed one hand against her heart. William's expression closed almost immediately, but the room had already witnessed the impossible. Emily slowly lowered the cake into place. "I apologize, Your Grace." "For the cake?" he asked. His voice was controlled again, though something uncertain remained behind it. "For whatever caused that sound." A few guests looked away to hide their smiles. William did not. He studied her as though she had opened a door he had ordered locked. Emily straightened, retrieved her dripping bouquet, and attempted to restore one crushed flower. She had been Duchess of Ravenhurst for less than 2 hours, and already she had stumbled during the receiving line, addressed an earl as doctor, and nearly sent the wedding supper onto the floor. Lady Margaret stepped forward. A duchess should possess grace. Emily glanced at the leaning cake. "Then I hope Ravenhurst has kept some in reserve." William's mouth moved again, almost a smile, but he turned toward the fireplace before anyone could be certain. Above it hung a portrait covered in black silk. The late Duchess Eleanor had watched over every room, even in absence, and William had guarded that absence like a sacred duty. Mrs. Bell leaned toward a younger servant near the wall. Her whisper was barely audible. 7 years, she said. His Grace has not smiled since the night Lady Eleanor died. Emily heard her. So did Lady Margaret. The older woman's face hardened as she looked at the new bride, not with annoyance now, but fear. Emily still held the damaged bouquet. William still faced the veiled portrait. Between them stood a crooked wedding cake, one escaped laugh, and the first crack Ravenhurst had allowed in 7 years. 3 weeks before the wedding, Emily Parker had been standing in the little schoolroom beside her father's empty desk when the letter from Ravenhurst arrived. Rain pressed softly against the narrow windows, and the roof leaked into a porcelain bowl near the stove. The school had belonged to Reverend Parker for 27 years. After his death, Emily had kept it open with borrowed coal, repaired books, and the stubborn belief that children should not lose their future simply because grief had taken hers. The letter bore the Hartwell seal. She broke it with careful fingers and read the first line twice. Her father had once saved the life of the late Duke of Ravenhurst during a winter carriage accident. In gratitude, the Hartwell family had promised that Emily would never be left without protection. She had known nothing of the promise. The final paragraph was written in another hand. Duke William Hartwell required a wife. Ravenhurst required stability. The school required money it no longer possessed. The arrangement was described as honorable. Emily thought it sounded efficient. For days later, she stood inside William's library while wind moved through the bare trees beyond the tall windows. He remained behind his desk, dressed in black, with an unopened file before him and a silver watch beside his hand. "You understand that this is not a courtship," he said. "I had gathered that from the absence of flowers." His gray eyes lifted. No amusement entered them. Not then. My estate needs an heir and a duchess capable of fulfilling public duties. Your father's school will receive permanent funding. You will be provided for. And what will you receive? Order. The answer came too quickly. Emily looked around the library. Every curtain was drawn halfway. The fire burned low. Above the mantel, a portrait had been covered with black silk. The entire room felt less occupied than preserved. Order appears to be doing very well without me, she said. William's jaw tightened. There will be conditions. I expected there might be. You may change your name. You will not change this house. Emily glanced again at the veiled portrait. Does the house belong to the living or the dead? Silence settled between them. William's fingers closed around the pocket watch. You speak boldly for someone asking protection. I did not ask for it. Your family offered it 7 years too late. The words were not cruel, but they struck something he kept guarded. He rose and moved toward the window, his posture rigid. Ravenhurst has traditions. So does the school. One of ours is repairing what has been neglected. You will not open closed rooms. You will not move personal belongings. You will not introduce music into the West Wing. Emily listened without interruption. Anything else? You will not attempt to replace my late wife. Her expression softened, though not with pity. I would not know how to replace a woman I never met. William turned toward her. Most women would find this arrangement intolerable. Most women are not trying to keep 40 children in a warm classroom. He studied her plain blue dress, her ink-stained glove, and the stubborn calm in her face. Then you agree? Emily looked once more at the black silk above the fireplace. I agree to marry you. I do not agree that mourning must govern every room forever. A faint hardness returned to his eyes. You will find Ravenhurst less easily changed than a schoolhouse. Emily picked up the unsigned contract. Then perhaps Ravenhurst should stop behaving as though it has already been buried. Emily arrived at Ravenhurst beneath a sky the color of old silver, with 1 trunk, 3 books, and a hatbox that refused to remain closed. The carriage crossed nearly 2 miles of frozen road before the estate appeared beyond the bare trees, its towers dark against the afternoon mist. No banners marked the approaching wedding. No music drifted from the windows. Ravenhurst seemed less like a home awaiting a bride than a monument guarding its silence. Mrs. Bell met Emily beneath the stone portico and accepted the hatbox just as its lid sprang open, releasing a pair of gloves, a folded ribbon, and 1 carefully wrapped schoolbook onto the steps. Emily bent to retrieve them, bumped her shoulder against the doorframe, and heard Lady Margaret Hartwell sigh behind her. A duchess should enter a house with dignity, the older woman said. Emily gathered the book and rose. I intended to. The hatbox had other plans. Mrs. Bell looked down quickly, concealing the smallest smile. Inside, the great hall was colder than the winter air. Heavy curtains covered the windows. Every clock had stopped at 11 minutes past 4. Emily noticed this before she noticed the portraits, the carved staircase, or the black silk draped across the gallery railings. Are they being repaired? She asked. Mrs. Bell's expression changed. No, miss. His Grace ordered them stopped 7 years ago. Lady Margaret answered more sharply. That was the hour Eleanor died. Emily looked toward the largest clock, its hands fixed above the empty hall. All of them. Every clock in the West Wing, Mrs. Bell said. The tour continued through rooms that seemed to have forgotten their purpose. The music room was locked. The piano beneath its dust cover had not been opened in years. The conservatory windows were gray with neglect, and dead vines curled along the glass like faded handwriting. Fresh flowers were absent from every table. Even the servants spoke in voices softened by habit. In the lower corridor, Emily heard a maid humming as she carried linens. The song stopped the moment Lady Margaret appeared. Music is not permitted in this part of the house, she said. The young maid lowered her eyes. Emily said nothing, but the rule followed her through the next room like a chill. Near the servants' stair, she noticed 2 footmen carrying nearly empty coal baskets. Is the next delivery late? She asked. Mrs. Bell hesitated. The household account says 3 tons arrived last week. Then Ravenhurst has remarkably hungry fireplaces. Lady Margaret's gaze sharpened. Household matters are not your concern before the wedding. Cold servants become household matters very quickly. That evening, Emily sat alone in the guest chamber assigned to her and examined the estate papers left for her signature. A coal invoice rested among the household summaries. 3 tons delivered. Paid in full. Beneath it lay a second charge for the same amount, written in another hand. She compared the dates, then the signatures. Both bore the name of Charles Whitmore, Ravenhest's estate manager. A soft knock sounded. William entered only after she gave permission, still dressed in black, his expression controlled. Lady Margaret tells me you questioned the staff. I asked about Cole. You have been here 4 hours. Long enough to feel the temperature. He looked at the papers spread across her desk. Those accounts are not your responsibility. Emily lifted the duplicate invoices. Then whose responsibility is it when Ravenhurst pays twice for coal that never arrives? For the first time since her arrival, William's stillness faltered. He took the documents from her and read them beneath the lamp. Where did you find these? Exactly where no one expected the future Duchess to look. Outside, wind pressed against the dark windows. Somewhere below, a child in the servants' wing began to cough. William's eyes moved toward the sound. Emily watched him hear what the house had taught him not to notice. Then she pointed toward the stopped clock on the mantel. Ravenhurst may prefer the past, Your Grace, but someone in the present is stealing from it. The following morning, Emily followed the smell of dust, lavender, and cold stone into the west corridor, where every door appeared identical beneath the dim winter light. Mrs. Bell had sent her to the small linen room beside the conservatory, but Emily counted the doors incorrectly and turned the wrong brass handle. The room beyond was not a linen room. It was a preserved afternoon from 7 years earlier. Pale blue curtains remained drawn across the windows. A porcelain cup rested beside a closed book. On a dress form near the wardrobe hung a silver gown protected beneath muslin. Along the walls were watercolor studies of roses, lilies, and climbing vines, each painted with such tenderness that Emily felt she had entered the private language of a woman she had never known. She should have left immediately. Instead, a draft lifted several loose papers from a writing table and scattered them across the carpet. Emily hurried to gather them before they slid beneath the furniture, catching her sleeve on the corner of a chair and nearly upsetting a vase of dried lavender. One page showed plans for a village garden and a glass classroom where children could study plants during winter. Another listed payments from a charitable fund created for the school and servants' infirmary. The figures were written in Eleanor's delicate hand. Emily frowned. Several amounts matched the missing coal payments she had found the night before. Beneath the plans lay a narrow ledger bound in faded green leather. Its entries began 8 years earlier and ended only weeks before Eleanor's death. Coal, repairs, school supplies, conservatory glass. Each payment had been approved through Charles Whitmore. Some amounts had been crossed out and rewritten. Others appeared twice. Emily turned to the final section and found a jagged edge where one page had been torn away. Put it down. William's voice came from the doorway, low enough to make the room colder. Emily turned too quickly, struck the desk with her hip, and sent a brass key sliding across the floor. It stopped at his polished shoe. He did not look at the key. His gaze remained fixed upon the ledger in her hands. I opened the wrong door, she said, and then remained in the wrong room. The papers fell. The room was locked. Emily glanced at the open door. Not successfully. William entered, his face stripped of every expression she had seen at the wedding. He took the ledger from her and closed it. Nothing here is to be touched. Someone already touched it. They removed the last page. His eyes flickered toward the torn binding. You have no right to search through Eleanor's belongings. I was gathering papers from the floor. You read them? Yes. The honesty stopped him more effectively than apology. Emily stepped toward the drawings on the wall. She wanted to open the conservatory for the village children. That plan was abandoned. By her, after her death. Then it was not abandoned. It was unfinished. William's hand tightened around the ledger. You arrived yesterday. You know nothing of her. Emily looked at the darkened windows, the covered gown, and the untouched cup. I know she loved light. His expression hardened. Do not presume to understand my wife. I do not, but I understand rooms. She crossed to the window and drew one curtain back only an inch. A thin blade of morning light touched the painted roses. William stepped forward. Close it. Emily did, but slowly. Why preserve the room of a woman who painted gardens as though she wanted everything to grow? Because this is all I have left. The words escaped him before pride could restrain them. Silence followed. Emily looked at him without pity. No, Your Grace. This is what you have refused to let change. He stared at her, wounded more by gentleness than accusation. She pointed to the torn ledger. Someone feared what Eleanor wrote on that missing page. If Charles removed it, then this room is not only a memorial. It is evidence. William looked down at the green leather cover. For 7 years, he had guarded the room from time. Now he understood that time had not been the only thing waiting outside its door. Over the next 10 days, Ravenhurst changed by inches. Emily did not throw open every curtain or demand that the clocks be restarted. She began with smaller rebellions. A vase of fresh rosemary appeared in the servants' hall. The kitchen maid was permitted to hum while kneading bread. 2 coal deliveries were counted before payment, and Charles Whitmore objected so loudly that even William began asking questions. The conservatory remained locked until Emily found the old brass key beneath a stack of gardening ledgers. She carried it to William rather than using it. You said I was not to open closed rooms, she reminded him. He looked at the key resting in her palm. And yet you found another one. Ravenhurst appears determined to place doors in my path. For a moment, something almost warm moved through his gray eyes. He took the key, then returned it. Open this one. The conservatory smelled of damp soil, dust, and winter leaves. Several glass panels were cracked. Dead vines hung from iron frames, but beneath the neglect, small green shoots had survived near the southern wall. Emily knelt to examine them and immediately caught her skirt on a broken watering stand. William reached out before she fell, one hand closing around her forearm. She steadied herself, surprised by the gentleness of his grip. He released her at once. You are remarkably consistent, he said. I prefer dependable flaws. The corner of his mouth shifted, but no smile came. Over the following days, Emily worked with the gardeners to clear the paths and restore Eleanor's plant tables. She did not remove the late Duchess's labels. She cleaned them carefully, preserving each faded name. William watched from the gallery more often than he admitted. He saw Emily drop a tray because she turned to catch a scullery maid who had slipped on the wet floor. He saw her spill ink across her cuff while shielding a tenant's petition from the rain. He saw her stumble in the village lane because she stepped into a puddle to keep a child from ruining his only pair of shoes. Her clumsiness was not carelessness. It was the visible cost of noticing everyone before herself. That realization unsettled him. One afternoon, he found her kneeling beside a cracked wooden box in the conservatory, surrounded by village children. She had opened Eleanor's old collection of seed packets and was explaining how roots could survive cold months beneath the soil. They appeared dead, Emily said, holding up a packet. But they are waiting. William stopped in the doorway. A little girl noticed him and became silent. The others followed. Emily looked over her shoulder. You have frightened the lesson. I was not aware I had entered one. Neither were they until 5 minutes ago. A boy held out a clay pot. Her Grace says we may plant these for spring. William looked at the child, then at the rows of newly cleaned glass. Did she? Emily rose too quickly, struck her shoulder against a hanging basket, and sent a cloud of dry petals over her hair. The children laughed. She stood beneath the pale shower with dignity that only made the scene more absurd. William tried to remain solemn. He failed. A quiet laugh escaped him, deeper than the one at the wedding and far less afraid. The children stared. Emily brushed petals from her sleeve. I am pleased the conservatory has found another use. William stepped closer and removed one dried petal from her hair. His fingers paused only an instant. So am I, he said. Then his gaze fell upon the wooden box beside her. Hidden beneath the seed packets was a narrow strip of torn green paper, its edge matching the missing page from Eleanor's ledger. William lifted the strip of green paper from beneath the seed packets with the care one might use for a fragile relic. The torn edge fit the missing place in Eleanor's ledger exactly. Emily sent the children back toward the kitchen with their clay pots, then closed the conservatory doors against the winter draft. Beneath the dust on the paper, Eleanor's handwriting remained clear. She had recorded payments from the village fund, each one redirected through Charles Whitmore's office. Coal money, school repairs, medicine for the servants' families. The final line named a private account in London and warned that Charles intended to destroy the records. William read it twice. She knew, he said, and she tried to tell you. Emily's voice held no accusation, which made the truth harder to bear. He unfolded the rest of the papers hidden inside the wooden box. Beneath the ledger page lay a sealed letter addressed to him. The wax had cracked with age, but the envelope remained unopened. William stared at his name in Eleanor's hand. Why would she hide this here? Perhaps she believed you would return to the garden. He looked around the neglected conservatory. I never did. His thumb broke the seal. The letter contained no anger. That was the cruelty of it. Eleanor wrote that she understood his duties, his meetings, and the weight of his title. She also wrote that love could not survive forever on postponed conversations. She had asked him to investigate Charles. She had asked him to come home before winter. Her final words were written more faintly than the rest. Do not make a shrine of the life we failed to finish. William lowered the page. The conservatory seemed to recede around him, glass and iron dissolving beneath 7 years of memory. She sent for me the day she died, he said. Emily remained still. Where were you? At a political dinner 30 miles away. I believed there would be time in the morning. His hand closed around the letter. There was not. Outside, snow began to drift against the restored panes. So you stopped the clocks, Emily said. I thought if the house remained unchanged, then I had not abandoned her completely. You turned regret into a rule for everyone. He looked at her, pain sharpening his features. You think grief is selfish? No. I think grief can become selfish when it demands that every living person kneel before it. The words landed between them without cruelty and without escape. William turned toward Eleanor's plant tables, now cleaned and waiting for spring. I had no right to laugh at the wedding. Why not? Because she could not. Emily stepped nearer, though she left several feet between them. Your smile does not take anything from her. It feels like betrayal. Then you have confused suffering with loyalty. William looked down at the letter again. You speak as though surviving is simple. It is not simple. It is only necessary. A loose pane rattled above them. Emily reached for the wooden box, caught her sleeve on the latch, and nearly sent the papers sliding to the floor. William caught them first. Their hands met over Eleanor's letter. This time, neither withdrew immediately. You always seem to fall toward trouble, he said quietly. Only when trouble leaves papers where I can find them. A faint smile touched his face, then faded beneath the weight of the evidence. William gathered the ledger and the letter. Charles must not know we found these. Emily looked toward the conservatory entrance. On the whetstone just inside the door lay a single brass cuff link bearing the Whitmore crest. Neither of them had heard anyone enter. William picked it up. He already knows. Lady Margaret announced the dinner before noon, calling it a celebration of Ravenhurst's renewed household. Emily understood at once that it was no celebration. By evening, the great dining hall glittered beneath 3 crystal chandeliers, every candle reflected in polished silver and rows of narrow wine glasses. Noble families from across the county filled the room, their voices elegant, their curiosity less so. Emily wore a pale blue gown chosen by Lady Margaret, its sleeves slightly too long, and its train arranged with enough fabric to challenge even the most graceful woman. William noticed immediately. She selected this dress, he said quietly as they waited outside the hall. Emily adjusted one glove. She selected the battlefield. His eyes moved toward her. You need not enter. And allow her to claim victory before supper? She offered him her arm. That would be impolite. They entered together. Conversation softened, then resumed in murmurs. Charles Whitmore stood near the far end of the table, smiling as though no brass cuff link had ever fallen from his coat. He wore another pair tonight. Lady Margaret welcomed Emily with a kiss near her cheek and a warning disguised as kindness. Do try to remember which fork belongs to which course. Emily looked at the 6 pieces of silver beside her plate. I had hoped the food would know. William lowered his gaze, but she saw the beginning of a smile. Dinner proceeded beneath careful questions about Emily's education, her father's income, and the size of the schoolhouse. Each answer was received with the polite interest reserved for unfortunate curiosities. When an elderly guest rose too quickly and lost his balance near the serving table, Emily stood to steady him. Her train caught beneath the leg of a chair. She reached the gentleman in time, but her elbow struck the edge of a silver tray. 6 crystal glasses tipped in a glittering line and fell onto the carpet, spilling red wine across the white cloth. No one was hurt. The silence was immediate. Then someone laughed. Another voice joined it. Lady Margaret remained seated, satisfaction bright in her eyes. "Grace cannot be taught," she said. Emily helped the elderly guest return safely to his chair before looking at the ruined table. "A glass can be replaced," she replied. "A cruel heart is harder to repair." The laughter stopped. Lady Margaret's face hardened. "You forget yourself." William rose. The movement alone silenced the room. "No," he said. She remembered someone else before herself. A quality this table might study with profit. His hand rested on the back of Emily's chair, not claiming her, but standing with her. Charles lifted his wine. "How moving. Ravenhurst has discovered charity and comedy in the same month." Emily glanced at the stains spreading across the tablecloth. "Then perhaps the household accounts should include both." William laughed. Not a hidden breath this time. The sound was warm, unmistakable, and entirely his own. Every face turned toward him. Lady Margaret looked as though the chandeliers had gone dark. Emily looked up, surprised by the ease in his expression. For one brief moment, Ravenhurst no longer seemed to be mourning. Then Mrs. Bell appeared beside the doorway, pale and anxious. She carried Eleanor's green ledger against her chest. "Your Grace," she said, "the West study has been searched." William's smile vanished. Charles shifted near the table. Something small fell from his sleeve and struck the floor with a soft metallic click. Emily looked down. A brass cuff link bearing the Whitmore crest rested beside the opened cabinet where William had hidden the copied accounts. Charles moved to retrieve it, but Emily reached it first. She lifted the cuff link between two fingers and met his eyes. "You appear to have misplaced another one," she said. Around them, the guests fell silent for a second time, but now it was not Emily they were watching. Charles looked at the cuff link in Emily's hand, then at the guests gathered around the table. His expression recovered first. "A misplaced ornament proves very little." "Twice misplaced," Emily said. "Once inside the conservatory and once beside a searched cabinet." Lady Margaret rose, her face pale with controlled anger. "This has gone far enough. You entered Eleanor's rooms without permission, opened her private papers, wore her colors, and now accuse a trusted servant of theft before our guests." Emily's fingers closed around the brass cuff link. "I wore the gown you selected, and accepted a title you were never meant to hold." The room shifted around them. Several guests lowered their eyes. Others leaned closer. Charles stepped beside Lady Margaret and placed a folded letter upon the table. "There is more," he said. "The late Duchess's final letter, supposedly discovered by the new bride, contains handwriting that no expert has examined. Conveniently, it praises the very changes her Grace wishes to impose." Emily felt William's hand leave the chair behind her. For one breath, she feared he had stepped away. Then he moved to her side. "You are accusing my wife of forgery," he said. Charles met his gaze. "I am asking whether grief has made you vulnerable to manipulation." Lady Margaret's voice softened into false concern. "William," she opened Eleanor's room, reopened the conservatory, and filled this house with strangers. "She is replacing everything your first wife left behind." William looked toward the covered portrait at the end of the hall. 7 years earlier, such words would have sealed his silence. Tonight, he reached into his coat and withdrew Eleanor's original letter. "No one is replacing her," he said. "That is the lie this house has lived under." He broke the old wax completely and unfolded the page beneath the chandeliers. His voice remained steady as he read Eleanor's account of missing village funds, her warning about Charles, and her final plea that Ravenhurst not become a shrine to unfinished sorrow. When he reached the last line, the room was silent enough to hear the fire settling in the hearth. Charles's face had lost its color. William placed the letter beside the green ledger. "The paper, ink, and seal have been verified by my solicitor. The account numbers match payments transferred through your office." Charles looked toward the doors, but 2 estate clerks were already standing there with Mrs. Bell. Emily opened the ledger to the restored page and laid the torn strip beside it. The edges matched perfectly. "Coal, medicine, school repairs, and conservatory funds," she said. "All paid. All missing." Lady Margaret turned sharply toward Charles. "You told me the accounts were in order." "They were misunderstood." William's gaze hardened. "They were stolen." No one raised a voice. No one needed to. The truth moved through the hall with more force than anger. William ordered every record secured and removed Charles from all estate authority until the county investigation was complete. Then he faced the guests. My wife did not steal Eleanor's memory. She returned meaning to it. She found what I refused to see, protected those I neglected, and brought life into rooms I had condemned to silence. Lady Margaret's composure broke. You would choose her over your own family? William looked at Emily. I am choosing what my family should have been. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they revealed the depth of the place she occupied. Not beloved. Necessary. Not chosen first. Chosen after grief had exhausted every other answer. Later, when the guests had gone and Ravenhurst stood quiet again, Emily returned to the conservatory. William found her beside Eleanor's unfinished garden plans, folding them carefully into their box. You defended me, she said. I should have done so sooner. You did what was right. Then stay. The request was simple, almost unguarded. Emily looked toward the newly cleaned glass, where snow reflected the dim light. I cannot remain as the woman who taught you to mourn correctly. His face changed. You are more than that. Perhaps, but you must know it without needing me here to prove it. She placed the brass key on the table between them. Finish the garden. Restore the school. Let the clocks move again. And you? Emily met his eyes. I am returning to my father's school. William took one step toward her, then stopped. He had learned enough to understand that love could not be built by closing another door. Emily passed him without touching his hand. At the conservatory entrance, she paused. Do not follow me tonight. He stood beneath Eleanor's winter roses and listened as her footsteps faded through the house. For the first time in 7 years, Ravenhurst was no longer silent. It was empty in a new way. Emily returned to the schoolhouse before sunrise, carrying one trunk, Eleanor's copied garden plans, and the silence she had chosen for herself. William did not follow that night. He remained at Ravenhurst and began, for the first time, to obey the truth without waiting for reward. The clocks in the West Wing were restarted at 11 minutes past 4, not to erase the hour Eleanor died, but to prove that time had continued. The black coverings were removed from the portraits. Music returned to the lower halls. The servants received the coal and medicine already paid for in their names. Charles Whitmore was dismissed, his accounts surrendered to the county authorities, and every missing dollar was restored to the village fund. William reopened the school endowment under Emily's father's name. Then he finished Eleanor's conservatory exactly as her drawings required, including the long-glass classroom where children could study during winter. He did not change her plans to impress Emily. He completed them because they had always deserved completion. 3 weeks passed. Ravenhurst grew warmer, but William felt the shape of Emily's absence in every room she had awakened. He heard laughter from the kitchen and no longer mistook it for betrayal. He saw children carrying seed trays through the conservatory and no longer looked toward Eleanor's portrait for permission to smile. On the first clear morning of March, he traveled the 5 miles to Reverend Parker's school without servants or ceremony. Emily stood on a small ladder repairing a curtain rod when he entered. She turned too quickly, caught her sleeve on the bracket, and nearly dropped the screwdriver. William reached the ladder in time to steady it. You still approach danger with remarkable confidence, he said. Emily climbed down carefully. Only household danger. It is more predictable than Duke's. He smiled. The expression no longer startled him. She noticed that. Why are you here? She asked. William placed a leather folder on her father's old desk. Inside were the permanent school endowment, the village accounts, and drawings of the completed conservatory. Emily read each page without speaking. You finished everything, she said. Everything I should have seen years ago. And Eleanor's room? Open. Her paintings are in the morning gallery. The children use her plant books. Emily closed the folder. You honored her. I finally listened to her. He looked around the schoolroom, at the repaired roof, the uneven desks, and the bowl no longer needed beneath the ceiling. I believed smiling meant I had forgotten her. You taught me it meant I had survived losing her. Emily's expression softened, but she did not move closer. Ravenhurst needed to live again. Ravenhurst needs a duchess. A shadow crossed her face. William shook his head. That is not why I came. He stepped nearer, leaving enough distance for refusal. The estate needs a duchess. I came because I need Emily. The room became very still. Outside, children crossed the yard carrying books beneath the early sun. You do not need me to rescue you from grief, she said. No. You do not need me to replace Eleanor. No. Then what do you need? William answered without title, duty, or defense. The woman who saw every person in a room before herself. The woman who made a house remember kindness. The woman whose laughter I want to hear even when nothing is falling. Emily looked down, and the faintest smile touched her mouth. Something is usually falling. Then I will stand nearby. She held his gaze for a long moment. I will return by choice. There is no other way I would have you. When they entered Ravenhouse together that afternoon, every clock was moving. The curtains stood open. Children worked beneath the conservatory glass, and music drifted from the west wing. Emily caught the edge of her traveling coat on the threshold and stumbled forward. William steadied her, then laughed openly before the entire household. This time, no one fell silent. Emily looked up at him and laughed too. Some hearts do not betray the dead by beating again. They honor them by finally choosing to live.